For our second day talking about Baroque in Southern Europe, we're actually going to focus more on the Baroque in Spain. Like Italy, Spain remained a heavily Catholic country, and Catholicism continued to play a very prominent role in their art even after the Protestant Reformation. Probably the most famous artist of the 17th century in Spain is Diego Velázquez. And Velázquez gets his start in a very ordinary way. He starts out making genre paintings like the one we see here. But very quickly his skills and his talents are recognized. The small details of this painting, the way the egg yolks float apart in the hot oil they're cooking in, the shine on the pans hanging in the background, and the detail of the figures, the blind older woman and her young grandson who helps her, caught the attention of relatively highly placed artists, and Velázquez was fairly quickly invited to come to Madrid and become part of the royal court. Once he moves to Madrid, he fairly quickly begins to associate with the highest levels of Spanish society, including painting several paintings of the king and queen himself. In contrast to the meticulous detail of his earlier work that we saw on the last slide, this portrait of Philip IV of Spain is actually quite sketchy. From a distance, the detail looks quite intense, but if we look very closely at any element, the lace or the pattern of silver on his brown trousers and doublet, we can actually see that Velázquez embraced a very quick gestural style here that creates the overall effect of the pattern, but does not hold up in that fine detail when we look very closely. This more expressive or gestural style probably comes from the short amount of time a still relatively low-status artist at the royal court would have had with the king. The king may have only posed once or twice, even for a full-length picture like this one. However, these meetings and Velázquez's apparent good manners and charisma were enough to forward his career in the royal court. He begins to receive notice from higher individuals, including a figure that's the king's top advisor who helps advance his career. And he is invited to bring his family to Madrid and to live in Madrid, a sign of respect and esteem. As he continues to work for the king and at the royal court, he continues to rise in status. Velázquez is not only known for his works as a painter, but he also takes on roles within the king's household, and eventually he will have a job that puts him in charge of not only Velázquez's own artwork, but all of the king's artworks, and he decides not only which art, but which furniture and which objects should be displayed and where they should be placed in the king's homes and as he travels from residence to residence. Velázquez is also entrusted to purchase works of art for the king, and he travels to Italy several times to view the works and purchase Italian works of art. While there, he's particularly influenced by the work of 16th century artists like Titian and Michelangelo. Probably Velázquez's most famous work today is this piece, Las Meninas, and the name of this means the handmaidens. It refers to the two older girls on either side of the central figure here. The central figure is the Spanish princess, Infanta or Princess Maria Teresa. And to the far left, we see Velázquez himself. We also see on the right-hand side two dwarves, and dwarves at this time were commonly employed by the courts as entertainers, and a dog. These figures are most likely there to entertain the sitter of Velázquez's portrait. However, there has been great arguments over the years about what exactly is portrayed in this portrait. Some art historians argue that the Infanta herself is being painted, but her placement next to Velázquez rather than in front of him doesn't make a lot of sense for her to be the subject of the portrait. Art historians who think that she is the subject say that this is just a convenient manipulation of these figures to allow Velázquez to include himself in this painting and to emphasize his closeness to the royal family. However, if we look just above the Infanta's head, we can see a mirror hanging on the rear wall of Velázquez's studio, and reflected in that mirror are the King and Queen of Spain. So other art historians have argued that they are actually the subject of this painting, and their daughter has been brought to them to entertain them and to keep them happy while they're doing the somewhat boring task of sitting for an official portrait. Art historians who argue that Maria Theresa is the subject of this portrait argue that the reflection of the king and queen in the mirror is simply an assumption that they are the intended audience. And if you are the king of Spain, you are so powerful that even in paintings, your reflection shows up in the mirror. Whether we believe that the king and queen are the subject of Velázquez's painting or Maria Theresa is the subject, what is true about this painting is that we do know that this is a very sophisticated use of space. Velázquez shows us space not only receding back from the picture plane, but he also projects that space forward. A very unusual adaptation or style of painting for this time. We also see that Velázquez intends this piece to really be his masterpiece and to be a statement of his prowess. Not only does he show himself in this large studio, and research has shown that, for instance, the paintings on the wall reflect Velázquez's actual studio. If we look on his chest, we can see that he is wearing a tabard, again this garment that covers the chest, with a red cross on it. This is a symbol of the Order of the Knights of Santiago, and this is an honorary knighthood, or an honorary order of knights, that shows Velázquez's rise from fairly humble beginnings to a close friend and confidant and member of the king's household.